Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas. In one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact, you're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do. It's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Greg Pak back on Word Balloon. Good to see you, buddy.
Glad. Thank you so much for having me, John. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. When I heard about this project you got that you're kickstarting, I was very excited because clearly by my plus X size, I know my way around a kitchen as well. And
Awesome.
I'm really excited to hear about Cooking Will Break Your Heart, a brand new cookbook. A combination of Korean and Texas recipes. That's from a family of tradition.
Yeah. It's believe it or not, it's a cookbook memoir. I first, I've been, I'm a comic book writer. That's mostly what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I cook a lot, and I've posted my pictures of my cooking on Twitter over the years, particularly during quarantine. Actually, I started doing a lot during the whole pandemic and quarantine, and so folks will fairly often say, "Hey, when are you going to do a cookbook?" And finally, I was like, "You know what? Now is when I'm going to do it." But then, as I thought about it, and I, started kind of putting together, my thoughts about what this thing should be, I realized pretty quickly that, we all know this. Cooking is history and family and memory, and there are few things in the world more emotional than our connections to food, and since that's totally primal. We think about the people who cooked for us and what it meant, and it's all tied up with love and grief and joy and everything else. And I've lost, I've lost. I realized I've lost a lot of the people who cooked the most for me in my life. And so I've been thinking a lot about, the stuff I learned and the stuff I cook and the people I cook for and the people who cook for me. And there's a lot to do. So this is a cookbook memoir. It'll be it'll be an incredibly practical cookbook with just really, fun recipes for the kinds of stuff I love to cook. And I'm a busy freelancer, so I don't have much time. And I have a real affection for simple meals that are pretty easy to make and also pretty easy to clean up. But I also, like delicious stuff. I'm biracial. I'm half Korean and half white, and grew up in Texas. So I've got a kind of a mix of different sort of influences from my family, and it's going to be a ton of fun.
I'm intrigued by the combination of Texas spices and Korean spices, and I am relatively new to Korean cuisine.
Mhm.
Of all places, in another comic book connection, when I went to Cincinnati for Tony Moore's old Cincinnati convention, I was Covington, Kentucky, right across the river from Cincinnati. Last place I expected to find an excellent Korean restaurant, but they had tremendous Korean barbecue. It was great. I had kimchi for the first time,
Oh yeah.
and again, yeah, I really think. I mean, it makes sense to me that I could see a connection between like Tex-Mex cooking and Korean cooking, and I wonder how much fusion there is in the book.
Well, it's usually I'm cooking a Korean meal, or I'm cooking whatever, a Tex-Mex meal or something else. But I also, but I also realize I just mix stuff up too. Like, in fact, just tonight I was cooking chili, and I usually put some soy sauce in my chili.
Interesting. Okay.
But I like, I've always just done that. You know what I mean? Like, it
Okay.
was never even a thing I didn't think about doing. It was just a thing I always did. But tonight I was thinking about the fact that, like, you look at chili recipes, and a lot of people put like brown sugar in their chili. I haven't done that, but I kind of didn't want to do that for some reason. That didn't like feel like the right thing to do. But I'm like cooking this chili, and I'm like, you know what? So people put brown sugar in to get a little something sweet in there. What about mirin? Mirin is this Japanese cooking wine, which has with a sweet Japanese rice wine, and I use it when I'm cooking. I use it in the marinade for kalbi, which is Korean barbecue, and I use it also when I'm cooking kimchi jjigae, which is a really great kimchi stew with like pork. It's like incredibly delicious. But yeah, and that mirin really adds something to it. And I was like, what? I mean, if I'm using that, why don't I just try it here? So I tried it. I did just tonight. It's funny you're asking me this, because just tonight I like tried a little mirin in the chili, and it was pretty delicious. Pretty
That's
good.
cool.
So
I was hoping there's going to be a chili recipe
yeah.
in the book. So
I'm still fooling around with I mean, it's fun too, because writing the book, it's like, like there's stuff that I just do. I've always, I've done it a certain way for a long time. But when I think about like, partly it's like, this, when you're cooking and you're used to cooking something, you don't really take measurements. You just kind of like, you're putting in whatever you're putting in, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I'm having to kind of analyze what I do a little bit more, and I'm thinking a little bit more about it. And like tonight, I'm thinking, well, what would, could this be better? Is there something else I should try here? So I'm trying some, I'm doing some stuff where I'm trying some new stuff as well, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. I feel like I need to try doing chili with a little brown sugar, like, just see what that's like and then compare.
That's outstanding, man. And forgive me, I'm like blanking. Did I bring this up? There it is, kids.
Yeah. While you've got to keep that up for 1 second, because I'm going to go turn a little thing and turn my, you vamp for me.
Okay,
man.
fair enough. Absolutely. Well, Greg is busying himself. I will tell everybody that there is an active Kickstarter that is just underway, and I'm going to take a look at it actually right now.
I'm back.
I was going to take a look here. Wow. Okay, so there are 3 weeks to go as we're recording this.
Yeah.
Broadcasting live, but of course for the audio people. 3 weeks to go, and well, you're at your goal. I mean, you're well past your goal, and I'm thrilled. Yeah. Certainly, always room for a little bit more. No, you're doing great. So I will take the visual up, and we will let people know what you were doing there.
All right, yeah. I noticed my fish tank light went out because I've got it on a timer, and it's it's a little late. And I was like, you know what? It looks kind of sad when that.
Oh, I see them in there. I was wondering because I saw the green, and I didn't see the fish, and I'm like, okay, now I just saw one swim by, so that's cool.
Yeah. Cooking was one of my big quarantine activities. Another one was getting nostalgic about fish tanks. I kept tanks.
That's great, man. We had fish tanks when I was a kid. It was fantastic, man.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep. So. But yeah, so yeah, where were we?
No, you were honestly what I was about to ask in terms of now your mom was Korean, and I know that's
no, my dad's Korean. My mom.
I beg your pardon. Okay,
nope,
excuse me.
Yeah, my mom. Yeah, my mom. In fact, in the I think in the blurb for the book, I've got it's a Korean Texan Midwest. It's a Korean Texan Midwest cookbook memoir about about love, family, death, grief, and joy, and all these kinds of things.
So
But
did your mom learn how to cook Korean dishes
she
from
did.
your mother-in-law, her mother-in-law?
She did a few, but she didn't actually cook that much Korean food. I mean, I really learned how to cook Korean food when I was, well, I learned some from my dad. I mean, just a little bit. And then I watched my grandma cook. There's a few things that she cooked that I have incredible nostalgia for. One is just a incredibly simple, just like bits of cod sliced and also zucchini, and you sort of dust it in flour and then cook it in an egg batter, and eat that with like a little bit of soy sauce and sesame oil, and it's just it's one of these, and you fry it, you know what I mean, and it's just a nostalgia food. It really it's one of those things that it just hits you a certain way.
Like a tempura, or
well, it's not deep fried, so it's just like kind of sauteed in a pan. But yeah, I mean, I guess I had never thought of it that way, but it is kind of similar. But not it's not that super crispy deep fried.
Sure.
It's more like like the fish in the egg batter stuff. But
real
home food stuff. But and then I after college, at a certain point I got a scholarship to go to England. I got a Rhodes Scholarship. I went to England to study history, and but when I was there, like the food in the dining halls was sort of notoriously not great, and I started cooking a lot with friends, and I happened to have a Taiwanese American friend and a Japanese American friend from Hawaii, and we ended up cooking together a lot, and that's when I kind of started to build my repertoire a little bit more broadly. But so my mom grew up in Indiana, and that's where the Midwest part of the blurb comes from. She passed away just a few months ago, and so this is also, I mean, that's that's when I talk about grief, that's what I'm talking about. Like it's real joy and grief, you know what I mean, like you eat foods you remember. And but I was looking through her old recipe box. She had she had all kinds of cookbooks and recipes, but she had a special little recipe box, and in that recipe box are some of the things that came down through like my the German English family on her side of the family, including things like Lebkuchen, which is a very specific kind of cookie, and another cookie which and I read this card, and this is, so there's another cookie that my mom used to make for us, my grandmother used to make, and my mom used to make, and it's this delicious kind of hazelnut kind of really nutty sort of cookie it's got a thumbprint and it's got jelly in it, and you eat one of those and you can't stop eating them, and suddenly you've eaten 15. They're small, they're like a little bit over an inch across.
Sure.
They got a kind of nice little nutty crunchiness to them, and then they got this, I mean, they're just amazing. And I looked at this card that my mom had. She'd like typewritten the recipe. I don't know, maybe my grandmother had typewritten that for her, I don't know, but it had it was, I couldn't understand what that recipe card meant, because it was just like I took German in high school and college, and the title of this cookie was obviously some form of German, but it wasn't a German word that exists. And I was like, what the heck is this even saying? Because I'm trying to like figure out what the original name of this cookie is. And so I'm looking at this thing and trying to translate it, and I'm coming up with all these ridiculous and wrong explanations for what it is, and then finally I realized there's a typo in the middle of it, and then there's some stuff that's just not, like just miswritten parts of it. But basically what it's trying to say is Linsentorchen, which is basically like tiny Linzer cakes.
Sure.
And a Linzer cake is like this kind of traditional jelly cake, or cake with jelly in it. And so this is like a Turchin is tart. So it's like a little Linzer tarts. And that is like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Anyway. But there's all these little mysteries, with you look in the stuff, and like over time stuff gets mistranslated, and suddenly you're calling something that it's not. You know what I mean?
Well, mentioning German desserts and cookies and cakes, I always find it interesting that there are certain types of food that really do go from country to country, and sometimes they're variations of the same thing.
Yeah.
And like you think of a biscotti and and a Zwieback.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny because the Germans and it's the Zwieback, and those are for people listening and watching. Sometimes they're crescent shape, and a biscotti. Obviously, you may see it at your favorite coffee shop or whatever. I'm Greek, and Greeks have something similar. We call them paksamavia, and a great long way. I have no idea what that translates to, but instead of kind of the almondy taste of a biscotti, ours have sesame seeds in them sometimes.
Oh.
They're not as sweet and don't have that almond influence. And weirdly, they're served a lot at funerals.
Oh, wow.
So as a kid, I mean, like the old people love them and they have them year round, and it's just like Zwiebacks and biscotti, great with coffee, fantastic with, and of course Greeks, we're having Turkish, similar to Turkish coffee because we're right there between Italy and all the Persian countries and everything. So, it's part of our culture as well. But as a kid, I would see them all the time at funerals, and I would refer to them as like, "Oh my God, there's the death cookies."
Yeah,
my
right.
family would crack up because they're like, "You're right. They are kind of traditionally served, sadly, when somebody passes." So, they're like, "Death cookies." I'm like,
that kind of stuff is fascinating to me though, because like there's certain tastes that can just take transport you. You smell something, or you taste something, and suddenly you're 40 years ago you're wherever you were. Like I remember I was in England, and I when I was a student there, and it was like a cold, wintry, blustery, nasty day. I was standing on this little bridge next to this tiny little strip of Chinese restaurants and shops that was on the edge of Oxford, where I was, and I'd ridden my little bike down there, and I had gotten a little thing of guava juice, and I was like standing on this bridge, looking out over this bridge on this lonely, cold, nasty day, and I took a sip of this guava juice, and it was like I got walloped, and I'm like in Honolulu in my grandma's house in Waikiki in Mililani town, and it was a trip. It was a trip because that's just a taste that's so associated with my grandma. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like that. I mean, I got like kind of choked up right there. You know what I mean? It's really powerful.
Yes. Oh no, sense and taste are absolutely transportive. In terms of the ability to and great memory senses and stuff. No, absolutely, man. I an aunt, my father's middle sister, was the baker in the family.
Oh.
And invariably will bring up, and she's been gone for about 15 years now, and we'll all talk about it. It's like, oh man, like just to have one of her lemon meringue pies.
I know
she was a master at it. And
yes.
I don't know if you've gotten into it, and obviously you're a foodie and everything, but I've been watching, I'm late to the game, but I've been watching the Great British Baking show, and it cracks me up. And also just as they try the various international desserts and everything in baking, it's amazing to watch. And you appreciate the different cultures, and also these novice bakers really trying to replicate something from a completely different culture.
Yeah, no, I get a big kick out of that show. Although I do have a kind of I do have a sort of, I don't know, how do I put it, ambivalence about it, because they're trying so hard to match somebody else's standard, and I'm more interested in the way individual families just do their own thing. You know what I mean? And like,
yes.
like this weird thing that an individual family does, and they do it just because I don't know, like we were talking about, because of, just sometimes it's just because this is the way grandma did it, because grandma didn't have hazelnuts, so she used almonds or pecans or whatever, you know what I mean? And so that's the way this family does it, and they just think that's the way it's always done. But you go back and there's a whole history behind it. There's a story, basically. So I mean, I'm most that those kinds of tweaks and those kinds of idiosyncrasies that tell the tale. That's the stuff that really gets me. I mean, I realized something about this myself. I just because I always had a taste for Napa cabbage. Napa cabbage is like the Chinese cabbage. It's the stuff that most kimchi, the most traditional kimchi, is made out of.
Okay,
it's the kind of very crisp cabbage. It comes in sort of it's shaped about like this. Like a European style cabbage is sort of like this. The Napa cabbage is more spread out. But it's got a kind of real crispness and a real tang to it. And when I eat kalbi, which is Korean barbecue, like there's a thing where you go to a restaurant, they're going to give you romaine lettuce usually, and also some other like Korean leaf vegetable. But typically you got a piece of romaine lettuce, you put some rice in there, you put some of the samjang, some of the sauce, the flavoring, the flavored sauce on it, and you put your meat in there and you fold it up like a lettuce taco and you eat it, and it's amazing. I like to eat that with Napa cabbage instead of romaine lettuce.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't even know why. And then I realized, and then I remembered, like when I was a kid, my dad he'd just like, he'd get Napa cabbage and he'd just eat it with gochujang, which is and rice. Gochujang is like the Korean hot pepper paste. And I talked to him about it, and I was like, I really like Napa cabbage, and I realized that I like to eat it with kalbi, and he was like, yeah, I like that too. And I said, and it occurred to me that so I inherited that taste from him, and I asked him, I said, but like Korean restaurants, they usually serve it with romaine lettuce, and we were talking about it, and like he didn't grow up eating romaine lettuce, you know what I mean? Like he was born in 1935, and so he was in Korea until he was 13. So I don't know what, I mean, this is something I should probably try to research and find out. I don't know what the history is of when romaine lettuce was, became widespread in Korea.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So he grew up eating Napa cabbage with all this stuff. And so I've inherited that taste from him, which is kind of a trip, like basically Gen X inheriting silent generation taste, you know what I mean? While boomers, like Korean boomers probably, well, I mean, everybody loves Napa cabbage, but that tradition of eating Napa cabbage or eating kalbi with romaine lettuce is something that happened between my dad's generation and my generation. You know what I mean? And I got my taste from my dad's generation. So it's that kind of thing, so there's this whole story of immigration in what kind of freaking leaf vegetable you like to eat. You know what I mean? 100%. That stuff that blows my mind.
Absolutely, man. There were a chain of grocery stores in Chicago, and it was called Treasure Island. And the Greeks, they specifically catered to international cuisine.
Oh wow!
And international products. And again, Chicago. So I mean, we weren't a port city per se, but Lake Michigan, I don't know. But regardless, the old timers wouldn't even call it Treasure Island. They would just call it La Magagie, which means the store. Oh, yeah. And that didn't mean going to a regular grocery store. It meant specifically, no, we're going here because this is where we get the olive oil.
Yeah.
That they import from Greece and stuff that. So you're right about all that. And also, like you were saying about produce and stuff, I mean, we're very spoiled in terms of the immediacy of fresh produce that we now have access to. Mm-hmm. And that really wasn't the case. And that's why canned fruits and vegetables were such a staple for a good portion of our lives and everything.
Yeah.
So
there's famous examples of that kind of Spam. You know what I mean?
Spam
is an incredible, it's part of kind of home food in a bunch of different Asian countries because of the U.S. military. You know what I mean?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so, the K rations and everything. Absolutely, man.
So that kind of thing is, I mean, all of that is there's
that's cool.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff with all that.
100%.
So in Cooking Will Break Your Heart, it's going to be a lot of, there'll be those kinds of details, but filtered through this very specific family, one specific family. Should be a lot of fun.
It's
It's
exciting.
also, I'm also gonna, there'll be photographs. I've taken hundreds of photographs of food as I'm preparing
Good.
it.
Sure.
So there's going to be it'll be lushly illustrated in
Lovely.
practical ways. So if
Your
you're,
your your Twitter feed of the finished product is always exciting, man. No,
oh,
no,
thank
no.
you, very much.
Absolutely. And people will see it too if they go to the Kickstarter for
Yes,
it as well.
go, and you can just go to Kickstarter and type in "Cooking Will Break Your Heart" and it'll pop right up, and you can feel free to back it. You can also go to cookingwillbreakyourheart.com and that'll take you to the Kickstarter.
Outstanding. Yeah, you're honestly, Greg, you're one of these Kickstarter gurus that has really figured it out in, I think, such a great way. And I loved your video as well. People
Oh, thanks.
see it for themselves, but it's true. Kickstarter has really afforded you this opportunity to pursue a lot of other creative ideas.
Yeah.
This cookbook is one of them, but you've stretched in a lot of really cool ways. And
Oh,
I'm
thanks.
really glad your audience has followed you and allowed you to do this.
Yeah, no, it's a huge thing, I've been very fortunate and continue to be very fortunate that I'm working with fantastic editors that I love at a bunch of different big and small companies, doing work for hire stuff as well as creator-owned comics at different companies, and I love all that, and I love those editors, and I love that work, but it is reassuring as a freelancer and as an independent creator to have as many different places as possible to get your stuff out into the world, and to have some purely independent ways to do stuff, so that if everything else mysteriously dries up one day, because wonderful people, and if you're listening here and if you're one of these wonderful people, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Wonderful people have backed these projects and come back and back them again and again, and that gives me some confidence that I'm always going to be able to write something and get it out in the world. You know what I mean? That
I do.
there's an audience for it, and that's huge. That's huge. I'm very grateful to all those backers. Very grateful to Kickstarter. Grateful to you. We were just talking about this before we started, John, but I'm hugely grateful to folks like yourself who are interested in talking to folks like me about these quirky independent projects, as well as our Stranger Things and Darth Vader books.
Well, absolutely, man. But I always feel a kinship with the creatives in the comics world, because I'm making my little puppet shows here at Word Balloon, and not only talking about nerd stuff, but also boxing and things like that. And through the good graces of the League of Word Balloon listeners, my patrons that crowdfund me and help me in my way. So thank you, everybody. I'll share Greg's thanking everybody that's watching and listening. But we got a couple comic questions. Radium Theater Productions would love to hear about your experiences with New 52 Superman.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like taking over from Grant Morrison as action built towards Superman's? Well, I don't think it was part of the original plan, but eventually, they kind of killed off New 52 Superman to bring back post-crisis Superman.
Right. It was a ton of fun. I mean, I was working with Aaron Cooter, who's one of my favorite people in comics, and he was the artist of the book, and we did that book plot first, or what some people call Marvel style, which means that as the writer, I was writing basically a detailed outline that I'd break down page by page and panel by panel, but I wouldn't flesh out all the dialogue, and I'd leave it, pretty open. And then Aaron would read that outline, and then he'd lay out the book. And then we'd get on the phone and talk it all through, and I'd go in and finish the script, and he'd draw it, and then I'd dialogue the script against his art, so it was a hugely collaborative process, and by the end of it we were essentially co-writing the book. We've got co-writer credit on the book by the end of it. So on a creative level, it was that relationship was fantastic. But in the question you're asking specifically about following Morrison, in comics from the very beginning of my comics career, it's like you're always following somebody. You're following somebody huge usually. You know what I mean? Like you're following Stan Lee, you're following Jim Starlin, you're following Grant Morrison. I followed Grant Morrison multiple times. I was working on the Phoenix Endsong book, which borrowed a lot from his X-Men run back in the day, so that kind of it's interesting because you kind of have. I mean, yeah, you need to have respect and kind of fall in love with what came before and incorporate that, because that's part of the job, is to, like comics continuity is part of the job, and the shared universe is part of the job. So taking all that into account and using that, it's like you're writing, it's like if you're writing history, you can't just ignore the history, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, you have to be kind of fearless. You have to give yourself permission to tell the story that you're going to tell, because that's why you were hired. You were hired because you're you, because you have your own voice and your own angle on things, and that's exactly what the folks before you did. You know what I mean? They took into account what came before, and then they found that new angle, and they and brought something new to it. So that's, yeah. I mean, it is it is. I mean, if you stop and think about it too much, you can freak yourself out. So I try not. I try to keep moving like a shark, always moving.
Was there any sort of editorial edict for a different flavor of Superman, given that it was the New 52, and in the original Inception was, all right, no, forget about continuity. We are restarting the DC universe with these books,
right? Well,
I remember Rags Morales's original design for Superman. He was in the T-shirt and the jeans. The cape was shorter and everything. And so, yeah, I mean, was there any sort of, other than the fact that he was younger and it was, intended to be a fresher take on the character? Yeah. Was there any other stripes to his character?
Well, at the time, I mean, by the time I came on board, I kind of came on in the second wave of New 52 stuff. So by the time I came on board, there had been a year or so of continuity established. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I was stepping into, so I wasn't in that first wave where I'm kind of creating everything, doing this new take from scratch. By the time I came, this new take had been established. So I got to run with it. But the new take I loved, because what it did is it gave me a Superman who was younger and who was still learning stuff, still figuring out what the heck, who was capable of being surprised all the time, who was still testing his own, figuring out his own degrees of responsibility and ability, and making mistakes and doing his best at every single moment. I mean, at his core, he is always, he's Clark Kent. You know what I mean? I love that dude. Love that guy.
We Clark. All do, man. Absolutely.
And he's the best. Yeah, and he is desperately trying to do the right thing at every moment, and also joyfully trying to do the right thing. But he's young enough that it's not always clear to him what exactly he should be, how to muddle through this stuff. And so that was a great and exciting point to take him on, and it allowed for a lot of really fun stories. Also, we got to one thing we did do, and I guess one of the things we're most known for is that in that first arc we brought back Lana Lang and kind of did a new spin on her. I mean, I loved the notion that this is Clark's oldest friend who just knows him as Clark. You know what I mean? So he's Superman, he's flying around Superman, but she's like, this is Clark. You know what I mean? Like, nobody else can look at him and be like, Clark, you know what I mean? And that's a great dynamic, and for particularly for a character like Superman, who's capable of all this, to have somebody around you who is, and she was kind of, amazed and dazzled from time to time, but she also was like, I know who you are, and
yes.
And so to have a character like that, with that kind of, it's a grounding character. It's a really grounding character, and it was a great dynamic. And
it's like Foggy with Daredevil. I mean, it's like, no, and no, you need. I absolutely agree, because that's the greatest thing about the civilians around these heroes, and especially the ones who really know their true self, just like Alfred with Batman. But where you need someone that can cut through the shit, or the aura of superiority and just be like, hey man, do you know what you're doing? Like, wait a minute. I don't think, and that's what I loved about Foggy. And no, Lana, you're in your guys running everything. No, Lana had that. That's why sometimes when they give powers to a civilian, I'm like, oh no, don't do that, because you need that difference, I think, to make the conversations more interesting, rather than, hey, I think you're doing this wrong. And it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, it's,
Yeah, everything goes through cycles. Everybody gets powered up eventually. You know what I mean? That's fine. That's fine.
Sure.
But,
no, you're right. Though. I mean, they did it with Lana as well, with Superwoman for a while.
Exactly.
So no, I get it. Oh, and Radium also, as a follow-up, wants to know any particular stories in the run. Now, you mentioned Lana Lang, but also he's interested in your Batman Superman run too.
Oh yeah. Well, I loved. One of my very favorite stories we did in Action Comics, it's a one-shot basically, and it was our Bizarro issue. It was, I think, issue number 40, and it was just, that should have won all the Eisners. It was kind of, I don't use the word perfect in talking about art, because it's nothing is perfect. You know what I mean? Like, everything is like, but it kind of felt almost perfect. You know what I mean? It was just a really
did Aaron
really
draw
fun,
that one as well?
Yes, and he drew the hell out of it. He had so much fun with every little detail. It was just so that's one of my sentimental favorites. I also like, we did a story, basically a Superman horror story. What do we call? Do we call it Horrorville? I don't know. But it was like a horror story in Smallville. It was a lot of fun. The Batman's okay. So he's asking about Batman Superman. We did a storyline where how did this work? So there was this trickster character that we introduced, and this kind of mystic trickster character who was messing with all kinds of, like tweaking reality here and there, and she pulled some strings, and we ended up with a how did it work? Oh my god, I'm spacing out now. It was where I think it was like, was it that both Clark and Bruce lost their memories, I think, and that's right. They both lost their memories, and they both had amnesia, and Bruce has no memory of the tragedies of his life. He's just like finds himself in this Batman suit, and then he like presses some little device, and then this incredible car comes roaring up at his behest, and then he finds out that he's a billionaire, and it's like he's got all these incredible toys, and he has the time of his life. You know what I mean? And he ends up teaming up with Lois. So it was like, and meanwhile, Clark has lost his memories, and he ends up falling under the wing of Catwoman, who is not the best of influences. So it was just a really fun storyline, which got where we got to have different dynamics for these characters. That was a real kick in the pants. So that's one I remember quite fondly.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Here, I've a couple more questions. And I don't know if it's Gomes or Gomez, or Gomez. Hi, Greg. I really enjoyed your work on Darth Vader. If you could choose one DC book to write, which one would it be?
Oh wow! If I could choose one DC book to write, well, I just did a short story for DC. DC did a book called Festival of Heroes, which was a Asian American anthology book, and I got to write a team up between Connor Hawke and Kenan Kong, the new Superman,
the Chinese Superman,
Chinese Superman that Gene Yang created, and Connor Hawke, who is son of the Green Arrow's son. He's also biracial. He's half Korean and half black. Actually, he's a quarter Korean and half black and half white, and he's multiracial. But and it was this, so it's this, two characters drive each other crazy kind of thing. Street level hero, big, like kind of. It's a little bit of a twist because usually the street level hero is sort of the rule breaker and all of that kind of stuff. But Connor's sort of like the straight arrow, get it? Arrow, green arrow.
I get it.
He's a bit of the straight arrow, and Kenan Kong is he's kind of a jerk. You know what I mean? He's really cocky and kind of a pain in the butt. And they drive each other crazy, and then they end up having dinner at Kenan Kong's aunt's house.
Yes, I remember that story. It was fantastic. Yeah, this summer, absolutely.
I had a tremendous amount of fun with those characters. I mean, I'd love to do more with those two characters. That would be a lot of fun.
That's cool. That would be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of, I'm intrigued by the whole Green Arrow stuff. Like this whole, the Robin Hood aspect of it and the way different, stories have leaned into that over the years. I think there's something there that would be fun to dig into. I would always love to come back and write more Superman at some point. I mean, like I say, Clark Kent and Bruce Banner, in terms of like, legacy heroes, like very traditional legacy heroes. Those are probably the two that most, I don't know. I feel I just kind of get them. You know what I mean? Like they
do.
It's funny too because they're very different in a lot of ways, but they're I love them both. So I would always be up for more Superman. Environmental warrior Oliver Queen, Radium Theater Productions says here in the comments. Yes, exactly. There's something intriguing about that.
Well, and I just love, Ollie's kind of the screw up of the DC universe. I mean, he's great, and it's, it was so much fun when you think back to the 40s that he really was kind of another Batman with a bow and arrow and trick arrows and stuff. And they made him a millionaire and all of that. But yeah, I mean, luckily people like Elliot Maggin and the people that followed, Mike Grell and others, really made him a more distinct character. And I kind of I like that, for a lack of a better word. He started off as kind of a deadbeat dad, but he's been trying, I think, in the last 25 years or so to rectify that and be a better dad. And Connor is like, oh, this kid that he didn't know, so he's trying to make good with him, and he's also trying to make good with Roy and Mia and all the others that have come under his umbrella. And then, of course, his relationship with Dinah too, Black Canary. So
yeah. No, there's fun stuff there.
Definitely. There's here Dante Hicks is really in on loving your Firefly.
Oh,
he's
nice.
just been fun and feels like what should have been a season 2 and 3 for that TV series. How long do you plan to stay on the series at Boom? And are there hints of what's to come on the series that you can share without spoiling?
Right. I can't reveal too much without spoiling. I will say that we're coming up to a big end on the story arc that we're working on right now. We're doing this Earth That Was story, and the setup of Firefly is that 500 years ago, humanity used up Earth and took off on generation ships and ended up in a whole different verse, and that's where all the stories take place. But we've been doing a storyline where they find our characters sort of stumble into a way back to Earth That Was, and there are people who are still survivors on Earth That Was 500 years later who have their own society and culture and all that. And now these these sojourners have returned, but now they're intruders basically. And so there's a whole story that's being told there. It's kind of, like, you can't go home again, or can you? Who knows? We'll see. So that's coming to a big head. There's a big emotional thing that I'm doing with the characters that is going to come to a huge head as well. I've got a little, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler. I've got a little 10-page story planned, which is going to be an incredibly quiet little, almost like a coda, but I'm incredibly excited about it. I don't know if a single punch will be thrown in that story, but it's going to kind of encapsulate a lot of what I've been working on for 3 years with this whole storyline, and I can't wait for it to get out to y'all.
That's cool, man. I know Boom's been a nice place for you. Isn't that where you did Mecha? And I'll screw up the title. Tell me that.
Yeah. Mecha U and Ronan Island. We both at Boom. Yeah, these are two completely new storylines, and Boom has been incredibly supportive. it's been Mecha at You. I did with Takeshi Miyazawa, the artist who I did a lot of my Kickstarter projects with. Also co-created Amadeus Cho with. Talk is one of my
absolutely
long-time favorite collaborators. It's just been a lot of fun working with that company and doing those books. The editors have really care about those storylines exactly the way I do. You know what I mean? Like they're really passionate about it. And the stories get better because I'm working with them. You know what I mean? Like that's the ideal. Like, in fact, way back, we were talking about Kickstarter earlier. Way back when, Talk and I were talking about doing what eventually became Mecha at You as a Kickstarter. And this was before I'd done any Kickstarters. So this was way back in 2011 or something like that. And at the, we kind of thought about that for a while, and the numbers didn't quite make sense because it wanted to be a longer story, and it's hard to do. I mean, no matter how big you are, it's hard to do a Kickstarter for a comics project that's longer than 100 pages or so. You know what I mean? It's just like if you're going to do it all from scratch through Kickstarter. So it kind of put that on hold a bit. Ended up doing the Code Monkey Save World project with Jonathan Colton, and which Talk drew. But eventually, came back around. I always knew that we wanted to do this Mecha at You project, and Cameron Chiddock, one of the editors at the time at Boom, came and saw me at a convention and was like, "Hey, and we'd love to work with you." And I was like, "Hey, I got this thing," and I had done a I sent him. We'd done a 10-page story that was part of a Asian American anthology book called Secret Identities, and sent him that, and he just immediately loved it. He got it, and I was like, "Okay, this is going to work," and we worked out all the business stuff, and that all worked out, and it's been a kick. And fast forward years later, and we did a 12-issue. We did a big 12-issue run. It was really well received, and won a Ringo Award, which was amazing. And now it's becoming a Netflix animated show. So it's sort of a trip.
That's fantastic, man. If I had heard that, I had forgotten. So congratulations on that. No, it's very Pacific Rim for people who haven't read it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We didn't even plug what it's about. Yeah. It's kids and giant robots,
Yeah.
And, but they're it's a bunch of kids, part of the idea is that giant robots come to Earth from time to time. Nobody knows why, nobody knows where they come from, but they bond with kids. And so the US military has built this whole encampment and school where these robots come down, and they train kids to be the ones to go out and bond with these things so they can pull them into the military industrial complex.
Yeah.
And they fight giant monsters and
sure.
all this kind of stuff and defend the world. But and our hero is is the janitor's kid at the school who never should have a shot at bonding with a robot, desperately wants to, loves them, ends up bonding with a robot, and ends up getting pulled into this school. He's the fish out of water, and it's a huge amount of fun.
No, it's a great series, man. I loved it. And I would imagine with the animated series coming, maybe another volume.
Who knows? I guess we'll see.
That's great.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. So fingers crossed that'll all work out, and we're bouncing ideas around, and I'm excited about that too.
And I mean, either you're part of the plan or you're hearing the buzz as well, and not part of the plan. But we keep hearing rumors that there might be a World War Hulk.
I honestly couldn't say if I knew anything. But I don't really know anything. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, so there've been. I mean, people throw rumors around all the time, so I don't know what's what until somebody tells me what's what. But I can't really say anything about it.
Fair enough. I understand. I loved. I mean, one of our recent talks, we talked about your novelization, or not really a novelization.
Oh yeah.
Well, how would you categorize? You're adapting your own material.
Yeah, it was a prose novel adaptation of the Planet Hulk graphic novel. It was my first prose novel, which was a lot of fun. So I mean that storyline. I mean, that'll probably be in my my obituary. But a
long time from now. But yes,
yes, exactly. Knock on wood and touch wood and all that kind of good stuff. But thank you. No, I mean, Planet Hulk has been. I mean, I love that storyline. It was a huge blessing to work on that thing, and just the legs that thing has been astounding. So, thrilled always for that thing to keep going. Like I from time because I'm a because everybody does it. I from time to time I check like the the list to see where what stuff how stuff is selling on Amazon and all that. And Planet Hulk and World War Hulk consistently pop up there in the top 100. Science fiction graphic novels, Marvel graphic novels. So it's it is a real thrill that you can't like plan for that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But like it's not like you can strategize towards that, but that was lightning in the bottle, and it was I'm lucky to have been in the right place at the right time and to have gotten the right assignment for me. You know what I mean? Like that's another part of it, is that sometimes I mean it's all so much of it is casting, and sometimes you get cast just right, and so I'm grateful to those editors for thinking Greg Pak might be the right person for this job.
Radium is asking good questions here. He wants to know, and really, this will dovetail in not only Firefly and obviously DC and Marvel stuff, but how do you find the voices of characters when you do expanded universe writing? So obviously Star Wars, but I mean, you did the John Wick story as well.
Yeah, I did Battlestar Galactica back in the day, and
yes,
so I've done a lot of this kind. I'm doing Stranger Things right now.
Absolutely, yes.
So with a lot of this, it's like you just watch the shows, you fall in love with those shows, you get those voices in your head. I mean, I've had Star Wars in my head since I was 8 years old. You know what I mean? So that it was a trip when I sat down to write those characters, because it was like, yeah, I this feels right. You know what I mean? Like you kind of like if you're a writer, you pay attention to rhythms and the kind of you think about the different choices people make with words and how some people use very few words and some people talk too much, and it's a real gift when you're doing this kind of work, because this kind of tie-in stuff, because you've got movies that you can watch to sort of internalize those rhythms. And some of those characters are just going to like click with you too. Like I remember writing Adama when I was working on that Battlestar Galactica book. And Adama, one of the big characteristics of Adama is he doesn't say too much, and so when he says something, he's thinking about it, and he doesn't always say, you know what I mean? Sometimes he's like very direct and he says what he's thinking, but also he says stuff without saying stuff as well. And that kind of expressing that way of expressing yourself, that just made a lot of sense to me. I think about both my grandfathers were they didn't talk much. They talked very little, both my white grandfather and my Korean grandfather. And so that kind of making your presence felt and communicating without communicating was really fun to write and natural and kind of also just under my skin. So sometimes you just have those kinds of connections. And then sometimes you have this kind of great chance to add to the canon. I mean, with the Darth Vader book, a big character in that Darth Vader book has been Ochi of Bestoon, who is the Sith assassin who featured in the last Star Wars movie. And he's got less than a minute of screen time. You never even see him in real time. You just see him in flashbacks and holograms and stuff. You never hear his voice. But we got the green light to use him at this earlier time in the storyline, and just the dynamic of where he was falling in. He basically became Vader's sidekick, and Vader's sidekick kind of can't be. I mean, you can do anything. You know what I mean? Like you do it well. But I was like, Vader's like, he's like the Hulk. He's like Clint Eastwood. He doesn't talk much. You know what I mean? And so you need to have somebody around Vader who talks too much. Like that's just a fun dynamic to have. And in the first arc, we had a droid who was just really talky, who was around Vader until Vader got a little tired of that. I won't spoil, but and then but so Ochi, developed into this kind of cocky screw up. You know what I mean? He's also a really dangerous assassin, but he's also like he's always kind of like overextending himself, and he's this like consummate survivor. He's doing whatever it takes to survive, and he's like got all of these different incredibly powerful forces swirling around him, and it's just and the folks at Lucasfilm, I mean, my editors at Marvel and the folks at Lucasfilm were all like, go for it. You know what I mean? Which is amazing.
Awesome.
It's amazing to like,
oh my God, yes,
be able to put that kind of thumbprint on a character on this. You go to the movies, he's up there on the big screen, and I'm kind of creating his voice. That's nuts. That's Gaga. So
Yeah,
But that's yeah.
Pumpkin Time was a big fan of what you did with the
Aw,
character there.
well, thank
That's
you,
what-
Pumpkin Time.
Absolutely, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's that goes back to that Grant Morrison question too, where it's like you kind of have to be fearless. I mean, you're terrified on some level, but you have to just like this is my best idea. I think it's awesome. Throw it out there and sell it. You know what I mean?
But
And,
it's great that because of such a I know that the Star Wars stuff you really need to get it vetted to get your ideas out
yeah.
there and get approved. So it's terrific that when you do have an idea like that they're like, yeah, man, go for it. So that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I mean, they're great. It's a lot. I can't even imagine their jobs because there's so much material that's part of that universe
Sure.
being created all the time, and there's a real effort to make it all fit into continuity, right? And contribute and matter. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing. Like comics fans, are like, is this story going to matter? You know what I mean? In the bigger picture, yes. You know, I mean, like that's yes, these stories do matter, and that's a huge thing to have licensors who feel that way and who are supportive and also are trying to find those, help you do your awesome thing. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful to them.
No, and the licensors realize that the fans want really authentic stories that do matter and do fit.
Yeah.
And it's great that the writers, I mean, you and I grew up on, crappy adaptations that, I mean, listen, I loved and appreciated guys like Marty Pasco and Len Wein writing Star Trek stories, and especially for Gold Key. But some of those Gold Key stories were completely bonkers and, didn't at all look like the series or feel like the series.
Hmm.
And it was great that it really seems like licensed books have really grown up. And now they do want it to feel like the films or the TV shows or whatever. And then again, the writers are fans of the stuff as well. Not that Len and Marty weren't fans; they absolutely were. But yeah, it was just
it's a fun time to be doing this stuff. I mean, the Stranger Things books I'm working on are also similarly just a blast. I'm doing a book called Tomb of Yibwin right now, which is Diego Galindo is drawing it, brilliant, and but it's delving into Will's reaction to, spoiler alert, the death of Bob Newby, and which the shows touch on, but there really is an untold story there, and they're like, yes, tell that. So we're telling that, I mean, and that's the way I feel about all this stuff is that I'm a good team player, you know what I mean? And I'm not like, I understand, like, I'm not gonna redefine the supernatural elements of Stranger Things. They're not gonna do that in my spin-off comic.
No.
And that's fine. They shouldn't. That should be in the TV show. But so I'm great at like just working with different, with whatever elements they will give me, I'm going to run with and play with, and I can make anything work. But what I need is an emotional hook that matters. You know what I mean? Like, and I can come up with those, and I'll pitch them. And but to have folks who are like, yes, that sounds cool, do that. It's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, all I need is just that thing, just that one little thing, just a little wiggle room here. You know what I mean? And so when they give you that, it's a huge thing. The Vader book has been, I mean, it's been incredible what they've let us do in the Vader book along those lines. Like the kind of emotional depth they've let us explore. The fact that we got to bring, again, spoiler alert, we got to bring back Sabe, who's Padme Amidala's basically body double, if you remember the handmaidens from the prequels.
Absolutely.
And all of the emotional weight that implies. It's, I mean, solid gold to be able to play with that kind of stuff.
No, that's great, man. Well, Donald Fagen on his Night Fly album, one of his songs was called "Walk Between the Raindrops," and that's essentially what you guys are doing when you have to kind of fit these stories within the bigger world, but also not tread upon what likely will be grist for films or television.
Yeah, it's sometimes we do that better than other times. Sometimes we have more room to do that than other times, but it really is a sweet thing when everything falls together.
That's great, man. Outstanding. Well done. And really, congratulations on. I'm sure there are other creator-owned, things that we might be seeing.
Yes,
In the
yeah.
future.
I can't reveal anything just yet, but yeah, I mean, I'll be totally honest. The pandemic kicked my ass. It was, there was a lot going on, and I kind of, dug in and did what I had to do, but I'm not one of those people who hunkered down during the pandemic and was able to crank out, 8,000 new projects. You know what I mean? Like it was, we're here in New York City. I got COVID during the first part of, like
Did you?
yeah, back in March, April of 2020. It was
Wow.
bad. It was
Was it
bad.
bad? Yeah. Yeah. Tell
I
us.
mean, I did not have a bad case. I won't say that. You know what I mean? I had what
What?
passes for a very mild case of,
Okay.
so thankful for that. But, but that, I mean, we've all been traumatized by the last 2 years. It's been a mess. But,
Totally.
but I'm kind of, getting things together, and should have some really exciting things to talk about soon. Also, and I think also, like Cooking Will Break Your Heart, I'm working on a lot of stuff that's really very personal, frankly. You know what I mean? Like more personal than some of the most personal stuff I've worked on in my career is happening right now, and I think that's it's a good time, and for that, and I hope y'all continue to enjoy it.
Final question from Pumpkin Time. He wants to know, and this might be spoilery, can we expect to see Valance and Vader have another showdown?
Oh, who knows? Who knows?
There you go.
What can I say? What can I say without spoiling too much? I'm intrigued by Valance. That's all I can say. I'm very intrigued by Valance.
Okay.
I have an eye on Valance.
And he also, just as a quick follow-up, how is it writing Star Wars event books, and how is that different from working on a Big Two event book?
Oh, okay. I mean, it's very similar. Like all of these events are, it's you've got half a dozen writers and editors, and they're a bear. You know what I mean? You've got, sometimes you have a single scene that's playing out from different angles in 4 different books. You know what I mean? And just on a scheduling level, it's like, which artist is going to draw that first? And then lay the template for that, and then making sure that everybody gets that reference. I mean, it's a trip. I mean, huge credit to Mark Paniccia, Danny Kazem, who are working on those books right now. Tom Groneman, who was on those books earlier. Those editors, they cannot get enough praise for the work they do. But as a writer, I mean, the Star Wars events. I mean, it's just as intense, but there are slightly fewer working parts. In the sense that a big, like a Marvel event like World War Hulk, which I wrote, affected almost literally every book that Marvel put out during those months. You know what I mean? So
yes,
and it used characters from just about every book. So there's literally dozens of people who had an opinion about what was gonna, and rightly so, you know what I mean, about what was going to happen with their characters in these stories. So that took, I mean, the level of just notes and discussions was through the roof for that. The Star Wars stuff, it's a little more focused. There's 6, there's a handful of books as opposed to a whole, what is it? There's 4 or 5 books instead of 15 or 20.
sure.
And we do a weekly Star Wars writer Zoom call, which is great. Sometimes we don't even have that much business to discuss, and we end up just kind of shooting the breeze, and it's
Sure.
great. I mean, like you end up really bonding with those your fellow creators, and that's huge. You make friends.
Yeah,
you make
that's
friends.
great.
You make real friends, and so that's all of that is tremendous.
I don't know if I ever asked you regarding World War Hulk. There were certain wrinkles to the story, and man, like the great face off between Black Bolt and the Hulk on the moon, and the Hulk kind of that wonderful intense scene of him walking through to Black Bolt's sound wave to get to him and beat the hell out of him. But for me, and that was an amazing scene. And John, wasn't it Ramita who didn't Johnny?
Yeah. That, I mean, Ramita told me that was the scene that sold him on the whole thing, because there's a moment there where, like, Black Bolt does his whisper and like the
Stop.
Hulk about this, and then Hulk says, "I don't want to hear you whisper. I want to hear you scream." And Ramita was like, "Yeah, I'm ready to draw this." He drew the hell out of that page. One of my biggest regrets is not buying that page, because I remember being at a con and seeing that page, and I did not happen to have $2,000 on hand.
I respect that.
I didn't buy it, but no, I mean it's tremendous. Yeah, he killed it. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, another moment like that to me, and again, what was great was it followed the character for a really long time, was the crushing of Doctor Strange's hands.
Oh yeah.
And that was like, so how was that worked out? Like, was it at a summit? Did you need a permission?
There was a series of summits, and and I can't remember. I don't remember where that specific I don't remember if I was the first one to say, and he crushes his hands, or if somebody had the idea of like, oh, and we should crush his hands, and then we can do something, we can do something more with that. I honestly don't remember where that idea first came out.
Okay.
I definitely had the idea that Strange would channel Zom, this ancient demon from his past, in order to try to, get the power to defeat the Hulk, and then it would be too much. You know what I mean? Like that would, so that Strange sort of overextends himself, kind of screws up. You know what I mean? And that was it was so he would have something to pay for it away. Like it's almost like he deserves to have his hands crushed, because
he went too far.
Yeah, he went too far, right? So that was a contribution. I'm pretty sure that was for me. But I mean there were a bunch of summits and sometime, God, it's been, how many years has it been now? It's been 14 years.
Wow. Yeah.
15, because the books came out in 2007.
Okay,
so it would have been like 16 years ago that we were talking about this stuff. So it's
yes,
it's or 15 years ago when we were talking about this stuff. Actually, we would have even started talking about it 16 years ago, because we were talking about this when I was working on Planet Hulk, because Planet Hulk set up World War Hulk.
Yep.
But so I am honestly fuzzy on some of those details. But in the room, as you discuss this stuff, ideas get thrown out from everywhere, and just the best ideas sort of rise to the top. And sometimes you'll pitch an idea and people are like, I don't know, and then like 3 months later it comes back, people like, that's what we should do, and then you just keep your mouth shut. You just say, yeah, that is what we should do. That's great.
I remember being at New York Comic-Con, and Newsarama had us doing video on the floor, and it was me and the comic book club guys.
Oh yeah.
At Pete LePage. We had a list of people we had to get to and stuff, and it was, all right, you do one, I do one. And he had done one, and he's like, oh, Greg Pak's next. He's like, can I please talk to Greg Pak? And I'm like, sure, man, it's cool. I'm like, all right, if I don't get him on the floor, I'll do a word balloon with him later on. It's cool. And he was so excited, and rightfully so, man, because those stories, like you said, Greg, I mean, that's, that really, and I'm glad. I mean, also your great work on Hercules with you and Fred Van Lente and stuff. And no, man, there are certain characters that people remember fondly, and it is terrific that and really, God, we're just coming off of Al Ewing's wonderful run on Immortal Hulk and everything. Mm-hmm. And there's just certain writers and certain characters where it's like, it fits. And clearly,
sometimes like I say, you can't always, we go into every single project with that, doing our very best to make it the best thing we can, fall in love with every one of them. And sometimes there's just like a little extra something. Things come together just the right way. You got the right people, and it's the right moment. That's another thing too, is that sometimes it's like you can do incredible work, and some of the best stuff you may ever do,
it doesn't find its audience
through,
Yeah, man. I talked to Wade about his Doctor Strange, and I really loved how it near the end really became this like medical, like hospital drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, good Lord, when's the last time? I mean, maybe Night Nurse in her original Inception was really the last time Marvel really had a kind of real hospital drama comic book and stuff. And it just, it's like, yep, didn't find its audience. So, okay, you move on to something else.
I mean, yeah, but the thing about that, though, even is that at every con, there's somebody who comes up holding this, whatever issue it is. And it may be an issue that the opposite also happens sometimes. Sometimes you do work that you yourself are like, we did our best, but that's a B-. You know what I mean? But
sure,
all the time there's somebody who comes up, they're holding that book, and it just hits them at the right time, and they love it. You know what I mean? Yep. So that I never despair. I really try not to badmouth my own work, partly because like everybody works so hard on this stuff. I don't want to.
Sure.
I don't want to like go slag stuff off and make a because that sounds like I'm slagging off my collaborators, and I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean?
I respect that,
and but also because they're like everything hits somebody in just the right way, and that's it's kind of a wonderful thing, honestly. Like to have a chance to do this for this long, and you see different stories, and also sometimes people kind of rediscover stuff, and suddenly a story that people didn't pay that much attention to, suddenly they're very excited about it, and that's amazing. All that's great.
I love how the CW and all the DC stuff that they do really fired up the JLA Detroit. So maligned for so many years, and people who loved it, and then just like you said, I mean, Jeff Johns grew up on that was his JLA, and also coming from Michigan, it really like got him excited. And now it's like it's kind of a nice sweet revenge where it's like a good portion of the CW audience loves Vibe and Gypsy and all these like characters that we're like, really, Vibe? All right.
I remember at a Marvel Summit a million years ago, we were talking about like different characters, like they were looking for a character to fill a certain slot in some story, and I was like, "What about Gamora?" And people looked at me and they're like, "Who's Gamora?" It's like Adam Warlock, she's the green assassin lady, and all that. And they're like, nerd. It's like, wow, what are you talking about? I'm surrounded by comic book nerds here. You guys don't know. Anyway, but because I'd written the Warlock book, so I'd reread all that stuff, and and now Gamora's like, it's like literally millions of people know that dress up as his character Halloween. It is really something the way these I did improv comedy for years and years, and one of the things that we used to always say was there's no such thing as a bad suggestion from the audience. Like you can roll your eyes about stuff, but you can make something happen with anything. I honestly believe that. I mean, every once in a while it's really, really hard, but there really is gold in just about any of these things, and getting the right team and the freedom to run a little wild, and to be fearless enough to really pitch your best work. Like that's and to get that kind of support for that kind of stuff. That's where the magic happens.
Final question from Dante. Any further plans with Weapon H?
Oh, thank you, Dante. Yeah, well, I love that character. I love that character's family. That was my favorite thing about that book, is that we really got to build out. It was a non-tragic superhero family. Is that even possible? You know what I mean? He had this great family dynamic with these kids and a grandma and his wife, and they were. I just love that whole thing. You know what I mean? That they were going to refuse to be tragic. You know what I mean? Like they were gonna make this work. Which is kind of adorable, particularly when you're paired with when the hero is a Wolverine Hulk hybrid, basically, would presumably be doomed to tragedy. But anyway, yeah, I had a lot of fun with that book, and had editors who got it and really ran with it, and folks like you who really enjoyed it. Thank you. I don't have any immediate plans with that character right now. I'm really primarily ensconced in the Star Wars universe right now, but in the fullness of time, I would love to get another bite at that apple, or I would be thrilled for somebody else to run with that character. That's it's actually really exciting sometimes, all the time, when other great writers get excited about something that you've co-created and run with it. Then that character really has legs when that starts to happen. So fingers crossed that'll have either I'll get back on that, or somebody really cool will get on that.
Well, that's the beauty, man. I mean, obviously that's the great thing about comics is if you don't do something about it, there's going to be a writer maybe 5 or 10 years down the line who's like, hey, man, let's bring that back. The Weapon H is pretty cool. And they'll have a new great idea. That's the wonderful thing. And certainly you've proven that with your own career as well. But the purpose of today, of course, was talking about Cooking Will Break Your Heart, a brand new cookbook on its way. The crowdfunding, there's 3 more weeks left to support Greg's book. I'm excited for this, and I look forward to getting some recipes out of it. And your spin on chili with the rice wine and some of the other spices and stuff sounds very, and putting soy sauce in chili sounds pretty intriguing.
Umami, baby. Yeah, so
absolutely, man. There's a great burger joint that is called Umami. It's
my gosh,
definitely Korean style hamburgers. It's unbelievable. It's so good.
That's hilarious.
So,
yeah, well, I appreciate you, man. And just go to Kickstarter, type in "Cooking Will Break Your Heart." It'll pop up. Feel free to check it out. I hope you'll consider backing. And John, I seriously really appreciate you,
dude. No worries. Absolutely, man. So Dante's asking again, the URL, it's cookingwillbreakyourheart.com.
Yeah, just Cooking Will Break Your Heart, no spaces, cookingwillbreakyourheart.com, and that'll take you right to the Kickstarter page.
There you go.
You can also go to gregpock.com, which is my website, and there's a big link there too.
Beautiful. There you go. Get everybody. Now we know. And dude, of course, you have carte blanche when it comes to Word Balloon. We let you cut the line, and it's right this way. So your reserve table is waiting. Don't worry about a thing.
Wow, you know who I am. It's amazing.
So very cool. Oh, hey, real fast. Wesley wants you to know he's a huge Planet Tank.
Oh, all right, Wesley. There you go. Someday I'm going to write a little book about aquariums. I've got a little monograph in my head that's slowly taking form. Aquariums will break your heart. How about that?
Yes, that's the next book. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So well done, Greg. Congratulations and good luck with this campaign already. Again, it's doing fine, but definitely could use everybody else's support. It's a great project. Cooking Will Break Your Heart, and I'm looking forward to it. So, and also new other books from Greg Bach. So as always, a pleasure. And I should let people know it's going to be a busy week here on Word Balloon. I'm pre-recording a conversation tomorrow with Max Allen Collins. He's got a new sci-fi crime book that he's put out from Neotext with the great Dave Thomas, the comedian from SCTV. Pretty cool stuff. And then Wednesday, I'm talking to Chip Zdarsky. That will be a Word Balloon Live in the afternoon. And Ryan Stegman and I, we haven't figured out the time yet, but we're talking on Thursday. So it's gonna be a very busy week here on Word Balloon. I hope everyone will join us. And I'm glad that you all joined us tonight